What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 32. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being put into people's squads or being taken out and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not. So let's get into it. So let's start with Erling Haaland. Some of you might have sold him like I did recently, and I think it's fair to say he's a bit of a priority to get back now because Man City, as we know, are going to double in game week 33. Arsenal at home, Burnley away, and arguably he's the best captain that week, and therefore you want to get him in. Is there a rush to do it before Chelsea away in game week 32? Not necessarily, but if you are sat there with a forward that's not looking great, you're a little bit worried about them, you've got the money to bring Haaland back in, I don't hate doing it before Chelsea away. Like, on paper, that doesn't look like a great fixture, and I think on their day, Chelsea can definitely keep the score down against Man City, but they've not defended that well since Rosenior came in. They have been conceding goals, and also Man City kind of on the up at the moment as well. They've started doing pretty well, especially with Cherki coming back into the team too. So ultimately, you need a plan to get Haaland in. It's just whether you do it this week or next week. Ultimately, I wouldn't force it this week, but I would want him for 33, even though he blanks in 34, purely for captaincy reasons. So let's stick to Man City and talk about Semenyo next. Same setup in terms of the fixtures. So Chelsea away in game week 32, double in 33, and blank in game week 34. Then after that, you've got Everton away in 35, and then they probably double again in game week 36. They've still got that match against Crystal Palace at home to rearrange. Now, it's not a guarantee it will go into game week 36, but it is quite likely. So you've got Brentford at home, Palace at home. Either way, you know that Man City will double some point again after game week 34. Then it's Bournemouth away 37. They end the season with Aston Villa at home in game week 38. Now, Semenyo is probably not as much of a priority because of captaincy. Now, you could just captain Semenyo instead of Haaland if you wanted to, but most people are going to go for Erling Haaland. So Semenyo is less of a priority, but if you've got the transfers to bring him in ahead of the double and to manage the blank in game week 34, or maybe you've used your wild card but you've got your free hit left and you're using that in game week 34, then I would probably bring Semenyo in if you can. Like, he just does look like the next best attacker outside of Erling Haaland. I know there's going to be some chat this week about Cherki, and he probably goes down as a don't hate it right now. He does seem to be playing a little bit more, although he didn't play in game week 30 against West Ham. He was on the bench, but he started game week 29, game week 28. He started against Arsenal in the FA Cup. He started against Arsenal in the Carabao Cup final. He started against Liverpool in the FA Cup as well. He is starting to be used more, and he is cheaper at 6.3 million. So if you're struggling for money, you could go for Cherki instead. I just think from everything we've seen so far this season, and since Semenyo came into Man City, he's more likely to keep getting the minutes, but he is super highly owned. So if you're at the position where you're trying to go a little bit differential, he's not that great for you. His overall ownership is 53.8%. It's super high. So if we're forgetting about money and ownership, I think Semenyo is better than Cherki. But if you want to take a bit of a punt instead, then Cherki's probably the one. And like I said, if you can manage game week 34, you've got enough transfers. Given they double in 33 and then they're going to have another double later on, City probably are one of the priority teams to think about right now. The only thing that's worth saying is obviously as soon as the league gets wrapped up for Arsenal, which is still likely to happen, by the way, I don't think they're going to bottle it and not win the league, then Man City might start rotating. They've only got FA Cup to worry about, but if that's the only trophy they can win once the league is done, then they may rotate, and then who knows what will happen as we get closer to that double in 36. But I don't think that's worth worrying about too much right now. If you've got the moves to bring them in ahead of the first double, then you probably should do it. There's just not a kind of rush to do it before Chelsea away, a bit like with Haaland. So interestingly, the midfielder with the second most amount of transfers in this week behind Bruno Fernandes is someone that doesn't have a double game week, and that's Anthony Gordon, but he has scored in each of his last 3 game weeks, and most of the fixtures that Newcastle have remaining this season are pretty good outside of game week 34 where they play Arsenal away. So it's Palace away in 32, Bournemouth at home in 33, then Arsenal away in the blank, then Brighton at home, Forest away, West Ham at home, and Fulham away to end the season. So the fixtures are pretty good most of the way through. I think Gordon's nailed on to start basically every game now. Newcastle don't have any other competitions to worry about. And although his average minutes per start this season are 74, they really have improved like in recent months. So you've got 88, 90, 84, 85, 77, 87. That's his minutes since game week 26. And he's often playing number 9, and we know he's got penalties, and he's not giving those penalties up for anyone. So I think he's really nice as a pick. This is always the stage of the season where you have to weigh up bringing in like if you've got no chips, like free hit wildcard, etc., you've got to weigh up bringing in single game weekers versus doubles. Now, in a lot of cases, the players with a double don't actually have any additional fixtures for the rest of the season because they lose it in 34. So as an example, if you were buying Tavernier from Bournemouth, yes, he's got an extra fixture in 33, but he blanks in game week 34. So Bournemouth and Newcastle have the same number of fixtures for the rest of the season. Whether you bring in the double game weeker instead really depends on how many transfers you've got. If you're really limited on transfers and chips, then I'd probably go for someone like Gordon who's going to play the whole way through for you, even though it's Arsenal in 34. Now, it's a bit of a different conversation with Man City players, because although they do blank, they've got another fixture to rearrange later on. So Man City do have one more game over Newcastle for the rest of the season. So in that scenario, I probably would edge towards buying Semenyo as long as you're confident in the minutes. And I think from what we've seen so far, you probably should be. But I will say this, I wouldn't guarantee Semenyo is going to start every game for the rest of the season. Now, I can't guarantee it for Gordon either, but I'm a lot more confident. So all I'm trying to say is it's not crazy to buy Gordon instead of a double game weeker. But again, if you've got the transfers, like let's say you're sat there without a free hit or a wild card, but you've got 3 or 4 transfers, you can make the play for the double game weeker instead and then maybe come back to Gordon in 35. I think because it's Arsenal away in the blank, it's a little bit less exciting to buy Gordon now. So maybe you come back to it from 35 onwards. I can tell you now, as someone that's considering wildcard in 32, how to get Gordon back in 35 is definitely on my mind. I don't think it's like a massive priority, but I do think he's a really good pick. I think Arsenal losing to Southampton basically scuppered all the plans. Gordon would have been locked on wildcard. Now, without the double, it's not so interesting, but I still think he's a really nice pick. Let's stick to midfielders and talk about Brian Mbeumo next, who's not been great for FPL recently. He's blanked 4 game weeks in a row and only has 2 assists in the last 6, so not brilliant in terms of returns. And he costs 8.6 million as well, so he's not exactly cheap. I think this one's pretty simple. No one should be thinking about buying him right now. If you're not wildcarding this week, though, I think it's probably worth keeping him. Now, again, there's caveats to that. If you're sat there with a ton of transfers, you want to take a punt on someone else instead, absolutely fine. But Leeds at home is pretty good. If you're not wildcarding this week, you can absolutely leave him for one more week and then decide what to do in game week 33. And also, it's worth saying, a lot of the double game week players for 33 don't have great fixtures in 32. So if you are looking to bring some of them in, waiting until the last possible moment for the maximum amount of information is probably worth doing. I would absolutely keep Mbeumo before buying a double game weeker in 33. I know there's some people that are concerned about whether or not he'll start because of the performances recently. I don't really think that's in question. Again, I cannot sit here and say it's 100% guaranteed he will start against Leeds, but I think it's pretty high from everything we've seen. I think it's one of Šeško or Ahmad that will drop out, not Mbeumo. So Mbeumo will either play on the right with Šeško through the middle, or Ahmad will come in and Šeško will drop out. I think it's pretty clear. So I think Mbeumo will start against Leeds. I think he's been a pretty good pick for most of the season. His numbers over the season have been decent. Yes, he's not on a great run of form right now, but that can change really quickly. And it can definitely change against Leeds at home in game week 32. So I wouldn't buy him. But if I'm not using a chip this week, I'm probably keeping him for Leeds, then deciding what to do in 33. So James Tarkowski is in the top 3 for defender transfers in this week, which I was a little bit surprised about given that Everton won't double for the rest of this season. And they've got Liverpool at home in 33 and City at home in 35, which doesn't look great. But when I thought about it a bit more, unless you're buying a double game week defender, there's not a huge amount of other options to go for that are miles better than Tarkowski. Like, most people have already got the Arsenal defenders that they want, so they'd be a great option, but most of you will already have them. I did think about Crystal Palace because they've got West Ham at home in game week 33, which is better than Everton's fixture, and they will likely double later on around game week 36, as I've already mentioned in this video. That's where the Man City game could get added. Now, Man City away is not great for a defender, but I would just see that as a bonus. So they might have Everton at home in 36 and Man City away. and then Brentford away in 37. But Palace play Liverpool away in 34, and that's the blank game week. So if you're not using chips that week, you don't necessarily want to bring in players with bad fixtures because you're already going to have some players without a fixture at all. And you can always come back to Palace players if they get that double. Sorry, when you know the double has been rearranged. And also for Crystal Palace, if they're still in Europe, they might start rotating a little bit more as we get towards the end of the season. So they're not even like a guarantee great pick. So I think if you don't want a double game weeker, Tarkowski's okay. But I think you probably should be prioritising double game week defenders instead, like Van Hecke, O'Reilly, etc. Because Liverpool at home in 33 is just not amazing. I know Everton can nick a clean sheet and he's great for defensive contributions. It just feels like the wrong time to buy him, basically. If you've got him, then maybe you keep him for Brentford away. They've got West Ham away in blank game week 34. But to buy him, I'd probably look elsewhere and try and go for a double game week defender if you can. So lots of people are selling Ekitike this week. He went off injured very early in the Brighton game in game week 31. Although we know he's back fit now. He played in the FA Cup against Man City, got about 70 minutes. But he was also on the bench against Spurs in game week 30. So it's not been great from an FPL point of view recently. And he cost 9.3 million. I think he's a really tricky one to know what to do with this week. Like, I'm looking at my team with Ekitike in it. If I don't wildcard, then ideally I want to keep him for that Fulham at home game, but I cannot guarantee the minutes. Even if Isak is still out, you can't guarantee the minutes. He literally got benched against Spurs in game week 30. They've got PSG midweek, then they play Fulham at home, then they've got PSG again. Now, they can't just forget about the Premier League because they need to secure top 5 to get into the Champions League next year. But obviously those 2 PSG games are also really important. I'd be very surprised if Ekitike doesn't start this week against PSG. Now, if he doesn't, that's probably a really good sign for Fulham. But he probably will. And then his minutes are probably going to be reduced against Fulham. I think right now, and obviously we'll have to take into account how much he plays in the Champions League. But right now my thought is I wouldn't force him out. But if I've got the spare transfer, I'd be quite tempted to sell him to someone with a better fixture this week, like Thiago or Bowen, who you know are going to play. Because you cannot guarantee that with Ekitike. For what it's worth, I think he probably will start against Fulham. It'll just be limited minutes. But it's really hard to know that for sure. And if Isak gets minutes off the bench against PSG, if he's in the squad, we'll have to wait and see on that. Could he start against Fulham? That does seem unlikely to me, I'll be honest. Because Isak seems to be in a constant cycle this season where he's either injured or he's trying to build up match fitness. And he's been out for so long, even if he gets minutes off the bench against PSG, is he really going to start against Fulham? I don't think so, but that might not stop Ekitike being benched as well. They can play Gakpo through the middle or something like that. So I think he is at risk in game week 32, and I wouldn't force him out, like take a hit or anything like that. But if you have got the spare transfer, I'd be tempted to deal with it. Because you just can't guarantee the minutes for the rest of the season, especially as Isak starts playing more and more. Speaking of Jarrod Bowen, I really like him this week, and I think he fits quite a few different chip strategies. So if you've got no chips whatsoever, let's say you've already used your wildcard and your free hit, the fixtures in the short term are pretty good, and the fixtures long term are not terrible either. So it's Wolves at home this week, then Palace away in 33, Everton at home in 34, Brentford away 35. That looks quite good. He's absolutely nailed on and probably still on penalties. He did miss one in the shootout, but I would expect him to take the next one if West Ham get one. So I'm not too worried about that. In 36, it is Arsenal at home, which is not great, but then it's Newcastle away and Leeds at home to end the season. Newcastle away is not a fixture you would target, but if you had to play Bowen in that, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's the Arsenal game I'd be more worried about. So fixtures the whole way through pretty good, but he also fits in for other chip strategies as well. So let's say you're free hitting in game week 33 for the double, you get Wolves at home, Everton at home, either side. And then if you're looking to wildcard a bit later, like 35, then you don't need to worry about those Arsenal and Newcastle games. So I think Bowen fits in definitely short term, but also maybe long term as well if you're limited on moves and chips and stuff like that as well. So I really like him. I don't see, if you need a new forward basically this week, I don't see any need to avoid him. I think if you're someone that doesn't own Bowen and you don't own Thiago instead, that's the player I'm trying to think of, it's a little bit trickier because Thiago's got Everton at home, Fulham at home, Man United away, West Ham at home. So I would say the next 4 are maybe slightly better for Thiago. But if you're free hitting in 33, it's Everton at home, Man United away, either side of it. So in that scenario where you're free hit 33, wildcard 35, Bowen is probably the slightly better pick. But if you need someone just to play from now until 35, I probably just about prefer Thiago. Again, if you've got the moves, definitely buy a double game weeker instead. But I think Bowen fits quite a few strategies and looks like a pretty decent pick. The only thing that slightly worries me is his underlying numbers. 0.17 expected goals per 90 this season is pretty bad. And 0.13 expected assists, also pretty bad. Now, we can all say, well, Bowen always ends up getting points. He always plays 90 minutes. Absolutely. I think he's a pretty good pick. But you know someone else that's had bad underlying numbers this season and always plays 90 minutes? Morgan Rogers. And that was fine when he was banging in goals from kind of 20 yards. But once that stopped, he didn't feel like such a good pick. So I think Bowen is a good pick, but there is something that slightly worries me about those underlying numbers. But if you look at his recent returns, like 2, 6, 4, 7, 4, 5, he has been fairly consistent, in part because he's picked up defensive contributions a few times. He's actually not, now I look at it, he's not scored since game week 24. I do think those underlying numbers are a slight concern. But I think in specific scenarios where you're like free hit 33, I still like the fixtures either side. And ultimately, good fixtures can bring returns. And Wolves at home, Everton at home is not bad. So I think he's a good pick. I just wouldn't be completely shocked if we sat here in 5 game weeks saying, well, he hasn't got much and the underlying numbers are still bad. So Joao Pedro is one of those double game week forwards you could buy instead of a Bowen or a Thiago. And he's a weird one this week where quite a few people are still buying him, but lots of people are selling him as well. I know there was a lot of hype after the hat-trick against Aston Villa, and then in classic FPL fashion, he has blanked in the following 2 weeks. But I still think he's a pretty good pick. I mean, Man City at home in 32 is not amazing. You don't have to rush to buy him, but he does have that double in 33, Man United at home, Brighton away. And if you can handle the blank in 34, it's then Forest at home in 35, Liverpool away in 36, not quite so good, but then Spurs at home 37, Sunderland away in 38. So the fixtures most of the way through are quite good. Chelsea are still trying to get top 5 in the Premier League so they can secure Champions League next year. So they're going to play their full strength team as much as possible. I don't think the FA Cup is that much of a concern in terms of Joao Pedro's minutes. And I don't think Liam Delap is good enough right now to consistently start number 9 for Chelsea. So Joao Pedro is going to play a lot. So I think he's a pretty nice pick if you can handle the blank in 34. If not, maybe you go for a Bowen or Thiago who's got fixtures the whole way through and you don't worry about the double. I will say though, if you are buying a double game week forward, I think there is a case to say that Calvert-Lewin might be a slightly better pick than Joao Pedro. Maybe that's a little bit harsh, but I think Calvert-Lewin is very competitive because Leeds fixtures are quite good. Like Man United away this week is not amazing on paper, but it's not that much worse than City at home, which Chelsea have. In the double, it's Wolves at home and Bournemouth away, which on paper is slightly better than what Chelsea have got. Chelsea the better team, of course, but it's a pretty good double for Leeds. Then they come back to Burnley at home 35, Spurs away 36, Brighton at home 37, West Ham away 38. Calvert-Lewin should be nailed. I think he's going to keep penalties. I know I think he missed one recently in the league, but he scored twice in the FA Cup against West Ham, once in normal time and once in the penalty shootout. So I think he will keep them. I think he's a pretty good pick, and he's cheaper as well. Now, again, money might not be a huge issue right now because lots of people don't have Saka, they don't have Salah, etc. There's money to go around, but it does keep your options open. You never know in the future when you might need that cash, and he's only 5.6 million compared to Joao Pedro at 7.8. I think it's a really close call. I'm thinking now, if I was wildcarding, I could only have one of them. My gut instinct is to say Joao Pedro, but I'm not sure that's the right call, especially with the Burnley at home fixture in 35. I think Calvert-Lewin's pretty good. I would, if you can handle the blank in 34, buy Joao Pedro or Calvert-Lewin over Bowen or Thiago. It depends on your chip strategy and stuff like that. But yeah, they're both good picks. It's close. I think the penalties and the price might swing it to Calvert-Lewin, but Joao Pedro in his own right is good. And I definitely wouldn't be selling him, by the way. Over 100,000 people have sold him this week. That doesn't make much sense to me. So if you're looking to buy a double game week defender this week, I think Van Hecke is one of your best options, especially when you consider the price of 4.5 million. And the nice thing about Brighton compared to some of the other double game week teams, they do have a nice fixture this week. Yes, it's away, but it's still Burnley. So Burnley away 32, the double is Spurs away and Chelsea at home, Then you got a blank in 34, not great in 35 because it's Newcastle away, but then it's Wolves at home 36, Leeds away 37. And then if I'd prepared this earlier, I could have brought up the fixtures to check game week 38, and it's Man United at home, which is not amazing. But I guess Van Heck's got a small chance of getting you DEFCONs and stuff like that. And at 4.5 million, and because he's a defender, he's benchable as well. So play him this week, play him 35, deal with him in the blank in 34, bench him for Newcastle, play him against Wolves, play him against Leeds or Man United if you need to. I think that's okay for 4.5 million. So I think he's one of the better defenders to bring in this week, but there is one that I think people are going to prefer instead. And that is, of course, Nico O'Reilly, who costs just 5 million and does seem to be fairly nailed for Man City at the moment, either playing left back or in midfield, and does have an eye for goal as well. He scored a few recently. Now, I don't expect that to necessarily continue at the current rate, but he does have that eye for goal. And interestingly, I spoke about Jared Bowen earlier, 0.17 expected goals per 90 over the course of this season. Nico O'Reilly, 0.16. Like, similar goal threat to Jared Bowen. Now, obviously, you'd expect Jared Bowen to score more for the rest of the season, but the underlying numbers are quite close. And obviously, O'Reilly's listed as a defender. Even with Chelsea away this week, and one of the games in the double being Arsenal, it's hard to look past him, especially if you don't need to worry about blank game week 34. After that, it's Everton away, then probably another double in 36, and then Bournemouth away in game week 37. And Man City end the season with Villa at home in 38. Now, how much Man City rotate later on will probably depend on the league status and stuff like that. But O'Reilly's just a really good pick. And I don't hate... I probably wouldn't rush again to bring him in before Chelsea away. But if you need a new defender this week and you want to set up for the double, I really don't hate it. Like, he should start, and who knows, he could go and get you another attack and return as well. He's just looking really good at the moment. I think it's also nicer to bring in Man City players because they're also playing a bit better as well. Like, they were always a good team, of course, but recently it does seem to have kind of gone up a notch as well. So, yeah, I mean, he's a good pick. I can't say anything negative about him. Do you need to rush to buy any player before Chelsea away, especially a defender? No. But if you need someone new, you don't want to go for Van Hecke, then O'Reilly probably is the one. So just a quick one on Jurrien Timber. He's not in Arsenal's Champions League squad midweek, which is a bit of a worry going into game week 32 against Bournemouth at home. He picked up an ankle injury in game week 31, and it seems like he's not recovered from that yet. Now, the word before the international break was that he'd probably be back afterwards, so I doubt he's that far away. But if he does miss Bournemouth, you've then got City away in game week 33, which is not great. Now, if you've got the squad where you can keep hold of him, Arsenal do play in blank game week 34, and it is a home game against Newcastle, and the fixtures for the rest of the season are pretty good. So as long as there's not a huge amount of rotation, Timber could still be a really good pick. But if you are struggling for players this week and next week, and he does miss the Bournemouth game, I think for some people he could be sellable. And then you go and look for a Van Hecke, maybe a cheap Leeds defender, or O'Reilly, who I just spoke about. So keep an eye on what Arteta says. He's not available midweek. He might be back for Bournemouth. But even if he is back, there's going to be some doubts about whether he plays. Then it's that City game in 34. So you'll have to look at your own squad and see if you can cope with possibly having to bench him. If not, I'd maybe consider selling him. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I am sure there is a ton of stuff I've not covered in this video that you want me to. There's still game week preview, there's still final thoughts, so don't panic about that. I'll go for a lot of your questions in those videos. Thanks for watching, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, see you soon.